Chapter 5. Boarding Action. UEF Orbital Station, Refit 1. October 31st, 2263. 03:56 hours. "Let's go, Marcus. We're on a schedule here," Commander Zeke Oakfield said to his lieutenant as they both stepped off the ramp of their unmarked shuttlecraft into a brightly lit, cavernous docking module. A mechanical arm descended from the hangar's rafters and clamped onto the shuttle's roof, locking it in place with a sharp pneumatic hiss of ammonia gas. Zeke's huge, dark-skinned second-in-command, Lieutenant Marcus Maximilian, looked up at the docking arm. "Interesting. That's not standard procedure." "No, it is not," Zeke agreed, gritting his teeth. The mirrored black deck plates reflected Zeke's grizzled face back up at him, complete with fraying dark red bandana and scorched skin. There hadn't been time to clean himself up after the frantic evacuation of Mars, which had barely ended a few hours ago. Zeke and Marcus were only here to find their new recruit, deal with the small matter of Zeke's court-martial, and then get the hell back to the war. This hangar was dedicated to the personal business of Rear Admiral Powell, who'd recently been reassigned to take over Refit 1's repair operations as hundreds of ships came in from battles along the UEF's shrinking territorial lines, particularly from the recent disaster at Mars. Zeke had accepted the Admiral's post-battle summons to Refit 1 in good faith, but now that was looking like a grave mistake. Arrayed ahead of them were a dozen armed military policemen, plus a handful of humanoid combat automatons. Two of the MPs sported powered battle armor, which was definitely an intimidation tactic. But compared to Imperial war suits, the two MPs resembled children's action figures. An overworked-looking, sallow-skinned colonel in an ill-fitting uniform and his two orderlies waited ahead of the security force. Upon seeing them, it took all of Zeke's self-control to keep walking. But with the hangar's docking clamps in place on his shuttlecraft, it was too late to turn back now. Zeke glanced over at Marcus. "I wasn't expecting this." "Me either. What's with all the firepower?" Marcus murmured back, straightening his cap. The lieutenant wore the same fatigues as Zeke, with a singlet emblazoned with their unit's nightshade flower insignia, plus an unlit cigar clamped between his teeth. Marcus also sported a cybernetic arm of synthetic muscle and titanium. "I don't know, but I don't like this," said Zeke. "Let's not do anything rash, my friend," Marcus replied, with the same quiet calm he'd exhibited since they'd first met in basic training. Zeke nodded, stopping and saluting the bookish-looking colonel, who stood waiting for them. "Commander Zeke Oakfield of Nightshade Squadron, reporting as ordered." "Excellent. You are hereby remanded into our custody, Commander," said the Weedley colonel. "Admiral Powell has decreed that we carry out your sentence immediately." Zeke's mouth dropped open faster than the bay doors of a high-altitude bomber. "My sentence? I have the right to an in-person trial, according to military law. Under these wartime circumstances, we conducted your trial with you in absentia, Commander. Witnesses from the Mars retreat testified about your behavior there. You have been found guilty of multiple crimes, including the countermanding of direct superior orders and misuse of Federation resources. Come with us. Do not resist." Zeke and Marcus exchanged glances. Zeke's instinct to escape the situation flared, though he tamped it down. "That's unacceptable. We saved people at Mars," Zeke barked, and Marcus nodded in agreement. "That is not for you or me to decide, Commander," the colonel replied. "I demand to speak with Admiral Powell myself, sir," Zeke said. "I'll work this out with him personally. Nightshade Squadron did nothing wrong out there. On the contrary, we're the reason all those refugees you're dealing with right now are alive. I don't care. We need to cuff you. Hold out your arms, the colonel said, waving his people forward. Zeke felt his adrenaline kicking up and sensed Marcus tensing beside him. But unarmed and surrounded, and in unfamiliar territory, there was no easy escape from this place. Zeke had no choice. He relented after a few moments, holding out his arms. Fine. Take me to Powell. A robotic automaton slapped a pair of stun cuffs onto his wrists. Marcus glanced at the restraints with a raised eyebrow, but the colonel shook his head. Commander Oakfield is the one we want. Leave us, Lieutenant. Do not interfere. My commander has the legal right to be accompanied by his second-in-command, even while in custody. He will not be mistreated, Marcus growled, fists balling. Zeke shot an angry look back at Marcus. He couldn't get himself dragged into this too. If Zeke was imprisoned, Marcus would become the interim leader for Nightshade Squadron. Who else would bring word of this clown show to Nightshade's other senior officers? They needed to find a way to escape. The colonel seemed hesitant, but Zeke sensed the man's discomfort with confrontation. The guards shifted uncomfortably. After losing his staring contest with the huge lieutenant, the colonel shrugged. As long as he doesn't interfere, your subordinate may attend as a witness. Guard them both. Try anything, though, and you'll pay. Marcus grunted. The MPs marched into formation around the two operators, with the power-armored bruisers at the front and rear. But Marcus's presence was a comfort, and gave Zeke a slightly better chance than zero of getting out of here. Turning on his heel, the colonel walked through the inner doors of the hangar. Zeke murmured out the side of his mouth to Marcus as they followed. Contact the kid, Lieutenant. We may have to make a quick exit. Marcus tapped his datapad, but a strange no connect icon flashed on the scuffed touchscreen. I'm locked out of the network, Commander. What? Huh? And you're not even on trial for anything. I might as well be, sir. Get a move on, one of the MPs barked. The bot who had installed Zeke's cuffs pressed a button on its forearm. Zeke was jolted into an unsteady walk, fuming at the humiliation. Do we need backup, Zeke? Marcus murmured. Zeke eyed the nearest guards. Our people are out of reach for now. Their orders are to hold position and refuel at our private way station until we report in. But eventually, Luther and the company captains will wonder what happened to us. And knowing them, they'll eventually take matters into their own hands. We'll have to find a way back to the Solanum before they try anything crazy. Bright side is, we have been in tighter spots before. Marcus did not look convinced. Affirmative, Commander. Refit 1 was the busiest military installation in the northern hemispheric orbital sector. The familiar smell of unwashed coveralls and vacuum-exposed fabrics filled Zeke's nose. Loudspeakers droned on and on without pause. Thousands of personnel passed through here daily, transferring from damaged warships to any remaining combat-effective Federation fleet elements that were docked here. A new duty rotation had started, overrunning the station's halls with a crush of bodies. Marines, pilots, flight crews, officers, army troopers, drop troopers, shock troopers, robotic worker drones, civilian contractors, and seemingly every other specialization passed by the prisoner detail in the narrow corridors. Shouted orders filled the air, accompanied by the din of conversation and griping from lower-ranked grunts, echoing through the passageways. Turbolifts and mass conveyors had to slow down because of the dense crowds. Notably for Zeke, many of the people around them were rough, sad-looking refugees. The sea of bobbing heads parted around them as Zeke and Marcus were marched through the orbital. Many passers-by gave them polite nods, salutes, and words of praise. Some of the refugees even cheered for them. Zeke was filled with pride, as their recognition of him confirmed his suspicions about their Martian origins, but their support would not help him in this situation. Zeke wished he'd brought along some of his other captains, like Chang or Ossington. Even a handful more of his people would have made a difference here. Zeke gazed through a corridor skylight, marveling at the beauty of the Earth's curvature. The planet was the cradle of their species, even ruined as it was in the long-ago fires of chemical weapons and nuclear fallout. His unit's base of operations, the Solanum, was floating around somewhere out there too, the largest Federation fleet prowler with full stealth capabilities. After this legal charade was over, Zeke and Marcus would be returning there, whether they were allowed to or not. "Commander!" A youthful voice carried through the chattering throngs. Zeke grinned as he spotted a girl hurrying over, following a map on her datapad. Marcus also brightened. "There she is. Just who I was hoping I'd find. Good morning, Private Jenkins. Or should I say, shrimp." Zeke greeted the girl as if he wasn't being marched along in stun cuffs. The guards trained their weapons on Jenkins. "Halt!" Right, Commander," she replied, alarmed by their aggression. Julia Jenkins had dark frizzy hair, which was bound in a tight, regulation-sized ball, and she wore standard fatigues, which were likely some of her only possessions right then. Upon seeing Jenkins's face, a memory hit Zeke, merely hours old. While the rest of his people focused on broader civilian evacuation efforts around Mars, Zeke had led Marcus and a small team of Nightshade operators into the burning ruins of the Red Planet's capital city, Olympus Mons, following a distress beacon. There, they had discovered Jenkins and several hundred others, barely hanging on to life. Ashen-faced and terrified, Jenkins and her group had survived weeks of orbital, aerial, and ground-based Imperial bombardment, clinging on to their distress signal as a last-ditch effort to live. Imperial damage done to the colony and the planet had threatened to undo a century of Federation terraforming efforts of Mars. Jenkins was only a few years past the minimum recruitment age, but after boarding the Solanum with the other survivors, she'd written and uploaded a sophisticated comm jamming algorithm into the ship's computers. When broadcast, it had thrown Imperial warships into nearly complete disarray during the Mars planetary evac operation, saving countless lives during the battle to protect the refugee fleet on its way back to Earth space. The surviving combat controllers and tech specialists within Zeke's unit had been impressed with Jenkins's talent for electronic warfare, convincing him to recruit her. After transferring Jenkins to a medical frigate for treatment with the other wounded, Zeke had promised that he'd find her again on Refit 1 when Nightshade returned to Earth for repairs and resupply. Now, here she was. Aside from some scorches, scrapes, and bandaging, the kid looked pretty good, given all she'd recently been through. Jenkins's datapad was beeping, tracking Zeke and Marcus's biosigns. "I heard you were coming, Commander. They asked me some questions about Mars." The colonel spoke as he continued walking, forcing Jenkins to keep pace with them. "Your testimony as witness to Zeke Oakfield's conduct is no longer required, Private Jenkins. Leave us." "My trial's over," Zeke confirmed. "Your trial's over?" Jenkins asked. "Why? How?" The kid's naivete was charming, but Jenkins wasn't grasping the political implications of what Zeke had pulled on the Red Planet. "They're taking me to see Powell to answer for disobeying his direct order to abandon Mars and everyone still alive on the surface and in orbit to the Imperials. That included you, by the way," Zeke replied to Jenkins. To the colonel, he added, "The girl stays with us. She gave you a statement, So she's involved. Jenkins's eyes darted around, glancing at the military police and their colonel, but she nodded her assent. The colonel glared at Zeke. Fine, but she cannot interfere. The MPs kept Jenkins in their sights, but Zeke was satisfied. They now had exactly what they'd come here for. Now all they had to do was slip these fools. Powell's court-martial be damned. A loud clang rang out, like a rogue meteoroid or debris had struck the module. Zeke glanced at Marcus. What the hell was that? The MPs and robots forced the march to continue. No idea, Commander, Marcus said. Refit 1 had automated defenses and kinetic shields to protect from hostile attacks and pieces of space junk, like the Phalanx magnetic accelerator cannons that were visible past the skylights. But those weren't firing. Another reverberating clang tore through the orbital. Marcus glanced down at his datapad, which still read disconnected from the military network. I don't like this, sir, he murmured. Yep, this is not good, I think. Zeke glanced down at Jenkins. Find out what just hit us, shrimp. Jenkins started tapping her datapad, but the colonel announced, In here, convict. He had stopped at a bulkhead door, which his guards opened for them. A dim, smelly, and musty chamber lay beyond. This was not Refit 1's brig. What are you trying to pull here? Zeke demanded. The guard shoved him inside without any further explanation. Marcus and Jenkins followed, but were held at gunpoint inside the door by the combat robots. The module was a 30 by 30 meter disposal chamber, featuring 3 airlocks for jettisoning waste products and recyclables outside to waiting haulers, piles of crates reeking garbage canisters, and other disposal equipment were stacked in rough piles against the walls. A dirty skylight barely brightened the dingy space. Zeke's stomach dropped. He was the waste product here. What the hell are you trying to pull, Colonel? Zeke asked, as the MPs prepared an airlock for decompression. Jenkins looked up at Marcus, but he held up a hand, murmuring, Wait, Private. One of the colonel's orderlies handed him a datapad. The small man took it and read aloud, Commander Zeke Oakfield, under the Uniform Code of United Earth Federation Military Justice, for disobeying a superior's orders and usurping command of Federation resources during wartime, you are sentenced to death. Death. And Powell has no interest in being here to watch. Where is he? Zeke growled. The Admiral is indisposed, the colonel remarked. Before anyone else could react, a two-tone noise sounded over the station's loudspeakers. Everyone stopped. The voice of Rear Admiral Powell himself blared. Attention, all hands. Zeke and Marcus exchanged glances. The Admiral's speech sounded strange, slurring his words slightly and speaking slower than usual, even though his tone was still somewhat commanding. This is Admiral Powell. Please remain calm, everyone. All defense stations are to remain on standby. Earth's orbital defenses are being peacefully boarded by a Solar Empire expeditionary fleet. There is no cause for alarm. If you are in your quarters, remain there until further notice. Avoid engaging the Imperial boarding teams and obey all of their commands. This is a prearranged non-combat event. That is all. Thank you. What? Zeke flitted through several emotions. Confusion, surprise, horror, and then rage. What the hell did he just say? A glance at Marcus revealed a very similar reaction. The military police looked just as flabbergasted. Zeke imagined scenes all across the station. Thousands of people were staring dumbstruck at the public address system. Panic would inevitably ensue. Something very wrong was happening here. Far worse than Zeke's fast-tracked bullshit execution. Marcus somehow maintained his dry demeanor. "It appears we've been betrayed, Commander." "It sure does. But why? And why did Powell sound like he's been hitting the sauce?" Nothing made sense. The UEF's armed forces were nowhere near the point of surrender. Or were they? Had Powell been compromised? Had he used his command authority over the orbital defenses to hand the homeworld over to the Empire? That would explain his reassignment here after the losses at Mars, if the higher Federation brass were also involved in this nonsense. The Colonel was the only one who looked like he'd been expecting the announcement. His orderlies glanced at him, eyes wide. So did the military policemen. Only the combat automatons, who were guarding the hallway doors, had no outward reaction. Jenkins broke the silence. The Empire's coming here?" Zeke was about to respond when another loud clang interrupted, reverberating through the deck, flickering the lights. Some of the guards lost their balance, but most kept their weapons trained on Zeke and his compatriots, murmuring amongst themselves. He couldn't blame them for wondering why they were screwing around here when the Empire was about to ruin everyone's day. "Boarding torpedoes are a bit extreme for a so-called peaceful action," Marcus said, failing to hide his concern. "It can't be. The outer shields would have to be down for that. There's no way Powell would just let them come aboard, right?" Zeke stammered. "Get in the airlock, Commander," the Colonel said, pointing at the chamber's door. "You can't be serious." Zeke rattled his cuffs. "You're still gonna go through with this, after what we just heard?" The Colonel shook his head. "The time for complaints is past, Commander. Regardless of our present circumstances, you must pay for your wastage of the Fourth Fleet and other Federation resources." "Screw that," said Zeke. "I came here for a fair hearing, sir, not this trumped-up horse shit." He didn't mention getting Jenkins and Marcus back to the Solanum and resuming his personal war against Emperor Hadrian Mariko. Those were minor details compared to not dying. With no other choice, and desperate to save his commander, Marcus exploded into action, barreling into the military policemen who were holding Zeke, but several automatons moved forth and forced him back with their overwhelming robotic strength. Jenkins dashed towards Zeke as well, but several MPs grabbed her arms. Zeke fought back as the Colonel's cronies shoved him into the airlock chamber. A shadow flashed overhead, blocking the sunlight. Moments later, another impact threw everyone to the deck. Zeke rolled over, groaning. Through the skylight, he spotted penetrator torpedoes boring into other module sections that made up Refit 1. Showers of them descended on neighboring defense platforms. The solar war had finally come home. Muffled gunfire and shouting echoed through the walls as Zeke tried to push himself up with cuffed wrists. From the sounds of frantic battle, Imperial troops were already pouring onto the station. The MPs hit the airlock controls before Zeke could scramble to his feet and get out. The thick, steel-framed glass panel slammed shut, locking him inside and deadening most exterior noise. "Jettison the convict! We need to return to the command center, now!" the Colonel barked, which Zeke was able to understand by reading his lips. He banged a fist against the glass and cursed, but the Colonel ignored him. As his breath frosted the window, Zeke saw the skinny Colonel's orderlies helping him back to his feet. Several automatons held Marcus down on his knees with powerful servos and weighted numbers, and Jenkins was faring no better. "You'll burn for this, you coward!" Zeke roared, pounding the glass again. "After everything Nightshade has done to save your worthless asses from the Empire, this is how you repay us?" The MPs ignored him. The gunfire in the corridor increased in tempo. One of the walls dented inward, spewing gas from a ruptured conduit. "Commander!" Marcus yelled, but Zeke couldn't hear anything through the glass, and Marcus was powerless to stop the execution anyway. Zeke knew that he should have gotten right back on that shuttle, fired the engines, and ripped free of those damned docking clamps when he first saw the Admiral's welcoming committee. Zeke's trust in the Federation's top brass was gone forever. But if he was being honest with himself, it had already been dead for years. "Do it! Kill him!" the colonel screamed. A massive impact deformed the hallway door inward. The gunfire outside ceased. The guards leveled their weapons at the damaged entryway. As this happened, the airlock chamber cycled atmospheres, preparing to blast Zeke out into the freezing void. It was getting harder to breathe. The artificial gravity plating inside the airlock clicked off with a dying hum. Zeke mentally prepared himself for what was about to happen to his body, letting the air out of his lungs. The disposal chamber's door exploded open, billowing smoke into the compartment. A huge armored body fell through and slammed into the deck, studded with decorative carbide spikes, human skulls, and Gauss slug impact holes that bled coolant and black blood onto the deck. The automatons guarding the door stared down at the body, puzzled. It was an Imperial soldier, a massive, genetically and cybernetically modified legionnaire of the Solar Empire, 500 pounds of organic killing machine encased in nanotech-powered heavy plate armor. But he was dead. Another figure stepped over the hulking Imperial, wearing armored, slim-fitting boots. The newcomer was tall, clad in a greatcoat and padded body glove, with a wide-brimmed hat and round glasses that reflected the sunlight. A mane of fiery red hair emerged from under her hat, the same shade as Zeke's. "I wouldn't press that airlock release, if I were you," Anne Oakfield said. Every weapon in the room locked onto the newcomer. "Take her down!" the colonel screeched. A mechanical eagle flew over Anne's shoulder, held aloft by anti-grav generators, shining targeting lasers onto every MP and robot in the module. Gunfire exploded and flashed around the chamber as Anne blurred out of sight, too fast for Zeke to follow. Marcus pulled Jenkins low to the ground as the Federation guards dropped in a flurry of shock beams and Gauss slugs. One of the armored bruisers slumped against the glass in front of Zeke, electricity arcing across his form. In seconds, it was over. The compartment was choked with smoke and weapons discharge. Most of the colonel's men hadn't even gotten time to fire their weapons. Gasping for air, Zeke spotted someone approaching his pressurized chamber, who hit the controls. He dropped to the deck as gravity kicked back to life in the tiny chamber. The transparent airlock door slid open, and sweet oxygen filled Zeke's lungs again, making him lightheaded. "There you are, brother." As the air scrubbers sucked smoke from the compartment, Zeke beheld his sister. "Anne?" he exclaimed, staggering to his feet. Anne stepped forward to help him up. "I'm glad I got to you when I did, Zeke." "Yeah, thanks. You're real good at that nick-of-time thing." Anne tipped her wide hat, which had somehow remained on her head during the lightning-fast shootout. The eagle landed on Anne's shoulder. "And I see Lincoln's still kicking ass, as always," said Zeke, nodding to the bird, who nodded right back at him. "Have you managed to talk to Dad? Nightshade has been operating behind enemy lines for so long. I haven't gotten a chance to tell him that you're alive." "I haven't been to the planet's surface yet, brother. You were my first stop, though our father is on my list, too." "How did you get off Colossus, Anne? Past all the Imperial defenses?" Marcus asked. "And how did you find us?" I have my ways, Anne said, winking at Lincoln. But there's no time for these questions. We have a slight situation, if you haven't noticed. The staccato rip-roar of automatic weapon fire resumed in the distance outside, echoing down the corridor and into the disposal room. Zeke scowled, automatically tensing at the noise. He turned to Jenkins. Collect some of their ammo, kid. We're going to be needing it. Leave them a little bit, though, enough for a fighting chance. The girl nodded and got to work without complaint, while Zeke returned his attention to his sister. You heard what that bastard Powell said. It makes no sense. It's clear that you missed some things after your adventure on Mars, Anne explained. The Federation is planning to surrender to the Solar Empire today. The Solar War is over. Zeke's mouth dropped open at his sister's words. You're kidding. I don't kid. How did you get this information, Anne? Marcus asked, picking up one of the military police's fallen weapons. Anne lit a cigar, beckoning to Marcus. The big lieutenant leaned in, allowing Anne to light his cigar too. After a puff, she answered, Lincoln interrupted a transmission between the Imperial flagship Eagle of the Ninth and UEF High Command 20 hours ago. The subject of discussion was total UEF surrender, which will take place later today. All Federation military assets around the homeworld are standing down. They're passing out the order to all remaining UEF installations and battle groups throughout the solar system. The Strategos Council has sold everyone out to Mariko. I'm sorry. No one replied. Zeke's mouth hung open. His mind raced. It was unbelievable, but Anne's story jived with Powell's announcement. Thousands of military personnel and civilian contractors were aboard this station, not to mention millions more manning the rest of the orbital network, plus the teeming billions inhabiting the planetary arcologies below them. It would be a disaster to allow Imperial legionnaires into any of those environments. Anne pointed to the large skylight without looking at it. See for yourselves. The Imperial flagship Eagle of the Ninth was indeed sliding into the sunlight, within range of every defense mass driver cannon in the sector, but they all stood silent. Flanking it were the IWF cruiser Nebuchadnezzar and the destroyer Hadrian's Chosen, followed by dozens more whale-like forms, bristling with city-killing weapons. The invasion fleet was monstrous, the largest that Zeke had seen fielded to date. Whatever deal that the Federation's politicians had made with Mariko, it was done, sealed, stamped, and beyond the point of no return. Another clang rang out. The unmistakable rapid bang-bang of Gauss gunfire echoed down the hall, followed by more screaming. Zeke grabbed an MP's compact submachine gun from where it had fallen, as Jenkins stripped the unconscious man's ammunition magazines from his uniform. So why go to all this trouble to find us? He asked his sister, checking the weapon over. I came to ask you for a favor. I need Nightshade Squadron, Zeke, Anne said. I am going to end Emperor Hadrian Mariko today. We will make him pay for everything he's done. To the UEF, to our people, to you, and to me. This is our last chance to end him, before his rule is solidified. Silence followed, punctuated by distant explosive decompressions. Jenkins looked from Zeke to Marcus, and then to Anne. You want to kill the Emperor? Absolutely, said Anne, like this was an achievable goal. Flabbergasted, Jenkins asked, How? That's why I found you, Zeke. Nightshade is how we'll end him, Anne said. Zeke spread his arms. Nightshade isn't known for regicide, Anne. We've never even been able to get close to him, and that's not for lack of trying. But you know him, and he knows you. Mariko talked highly of you when I worked with him after we left our father's operation. That counts for more than martial strength. I knew him, Anne. He's a different monster now than the man he was before, Zeke said. My familiarity with Hadrian Mariko from years ago won't give us a tangible edge in an assassination mission. Marcus's brow furrowed at this information, but he stayed silent. Zeke gave him a guilty, pacifying look, but chose to have this particular awkward talk later, given their present circumstances. Anne poked the flower insignia on Zeke's singlet. You command the most effective Spec Ops unit left in the UEF. You've dealt with his Praetorian sisterhood before as well. I need that expertise. I don't have enough hands to take Mariko down by myself. Zeke crossed his arms. He was about to rebuke his sister's crazy request when another torrent of gunfire echoed down the corridor. Too close. Lincoln croaked at Anne. Yes, time is against us, she said. We need to leave this place. I have a shuttle waiting. Good, because we can't use ours, Marcus pointed out. Wait a second. You couldn't have dropped this on us at a worse time, Anne, Zeke said, exasperated. We can't leave Refit 1 now, not with Imperials flooding onto this orbital. We have to defend this station. Almost everyone here is unprepared for what's coming. No time is ideal for something like this, Anne replied. What do you think, Lieutenant? Zeke cast a glance at Marcus, who was accepting a stack of ammo magazines and stun grenades from Jenkins. Your trial is over, and our precious cargo is secured. Marcus gestured to the girl, who went red. But we'd be abandoning a lot of people here if we leave now, and we know what the Imperials will do to anyone carrying the phage. Yeah, I need to confirm what the hell is going on first, said Zeke. We need to verify for sure what the UEF has done, and I can't let the Imperials massacre half the people on Refit 1. We can reactivate this station's defenses from the command center to give everyone a better chance to survive and escape. How's that sound, Jenkins? You up for the challenge? Yes, sir, Jenkins replied. Good. I think we'll find our dear old Admiral there, too, and maybe get some more concrete information about what the hell's happening, Zeke said. Then, and only then, we'll see about dealing with your vendetta against Mariko. Fine, but we don't have all day, said Anne, letting out a frustrated breath. Lead the way, brother.